Hey, this is Nikki G and welcome to Better Commander. Today we're going to talk about Captain Nagathrod, the legendary horror pirate from Commander Legends 2. Hey, before we get too deep into this, consider liking and subscribing to my channel so I can provide you with cards that go in these decks, because that's my whole thing. That's what I'm doing here. I'm trying to tell you about Magic the Gathering cards, you dingus. Alright, let's take a look at this guy. Captain Nagathrod is 3 black and a blue, my favorite 2 colors, for a legendary creature horror pirate that's a 3/6. Horrors you control have menace. Whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, that player mills that many cards. At the beginning of your end step, choose target artifact or creature card in an opponent's graveyard that was put there from their library this turn. Put it onto the battlefield under your control. Captain Nagathrod has a rich lore background behind him. So he was Johnny Depp's plumber. He actually introduced Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. Unfortunately, he got into Johnny Depp's stash and developed severe schizophrenia. He never actually got off the boat after being cast as an extra in Pirates of the Caribbean. So now him and the other horrors, not, Amber Heard, ride the boat and they just terrorize the 7 seas. All right, this guy is a great commander for what I would call a classical functional mill deck, a deck that uses your opponent's graveyards and things going in and out of your opponent's graveyards to kill them, which is the whole point of this whole thing. So we're going to need some horrors, and there are quite a few commander playable ones. There's a total of 187 horrors in Magic the Gathering. We're going to pick and choose a couple of them and talk about them today. And we're going to talk about some other cards that go on a deck like this. Reanimate, Animate Dead, and Necromancy are all efficient reanimation spells that can target anybody's graveyard. So Reanimate is 1 black mana for a sorcery. Put target creature card from any graveyard into play under your control. Lose life equal to that creature's total casting cost. This card can be had for $10 for the classic Visions version. This is a fantastic card to put in any black deck. Animate Dead is 1 and a black for an enchantment that gets a creature card out of any graveyard. Enchanted creature gets -1/-0. This is another fantastic card to put in your Reanimator decks. Necromancy is 2 and a black for an enchantment. You may choose to play Necromancy as an instant. If you do, bury it at the end of turn. So when you play Necromancy, choose target creature card in any graveyard. When Necromancy comes into play, put that creature into play as though it were just played, and Necromancy becomes a creature enchantment that targets that creature. If it leaves play, bury the creature. So this is another very efficient reanimation spell. It's an enchantment that you can put in your mill decks or Reanimator decks. Give it a little power, baby. How about Command the Dreadhorde? Look at Liliana stepping out in a purple dress. So it's 4 black for a sorcery. Choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards. Command the Dreadhorde deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. Put them onto the battlefield under your control. So this is a really cool mass reanimation spell. We can pick and choose vital cards to get out of our opponent's graveyards and put into play under our control. Oh, there's a Liliana again with her bros hanging out. Rise of the Dark Realms is 7 black for a sorcery. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. This is a real win condition in a deck like this, especially if you can give them haste somehow, probably with Crashing Drawbridge or something along those lines. Ghoul's Night Out is 3 black for a sorcery. For each player, choose a creature card in that player's graveyard. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. They're black zombies in addition to their other colors and types, and they gain Decayed. So this is a good way to get a bunch of stuff out of our opponent's graveyards and also a big fatty out of our own. How about Lorcan, Warlock Collector? It's 5 black for a legendary creature devil, 6/6 with flying. Whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyards from anywhere, you may pay life equal to its mana value. If you do, put it onto the battlefield under your control. It's a warlock in addition to its other types. So when our commander or one of our horrors mills a creature, we can pay its converted mana cost in life, and it comes back to the battlefield under our control. If a warlock you control would die, exile it instead. Rakshasa Debaser is 4 black for a creature cat demon. It's a 6/6. Whenever Rakshasa Debaser attacks, put target creature card from defending player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It also has Encore 6 black. This is another awesome big fatty that can get stuff out of our opponent's graveyards and is a good target for reanimation itself. Scion of Darkness. Look at this. This is Jesse the Body Ventura masquerading as the Scion of Darkness. 5 black, black, black for a creature avatar. He has trample. He's a 6/6. Whenever Scion of Darkness deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Cool thing about this card is that it has cycling 3, so you can discard it, draw a card, and then use this as a reanimation target. Sepulchral Primordial, 5 black black for a creature avatar. It's a 5/4, has Intimidate. When Sepulchral Primordial enters the battlefield for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So unless your mill really hasn't gone off, this is a great card to put in any black deck where you're going to be milling out other players' libraries. This is another underrated card. Yawgmoth's Vile Offering is 4 and a black for a legendary sorcery. You may only cast a legendary sorcery if you control a legendary creature or planeswalker, but hopefully we'll have our commander out. Put up to 1 target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and then destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker. Then you exile Yawgmoth's Vile Offering. I like how this card has a picture of Yawgmoth on there when he turned into a giant flesh castle or something. I don't really know the lore of this one. All right, let's get into some horrors. Abyssal Gatekeeper is 1 and a black for a 1/1. It's a Gatekeeper. If Abyssal Gatekeeper is put into any graveyard from play, each player chooses and buries a creature he controls. So basically, if it dies, each player sacrifices a creature. So this guy, I mean, he's a horror, number one. Gerard is trying to explain to him. It's like, look, dude, I didn't steal your hot Cheetos. I don't know why you're hanging out at this door, but I got to get through because, my mom's in there. Changeling Outcast is 1 black mana for a 1/1. It's a creature shapeshifter. It has Changeling, means it's every creature type. So this is also a horror. Changeling Outcast can't block and can't be blocked. So this guy, I mean, he's wandering the seas of cheese, but he'll get in there for some damage. Shapesharer is 1 and a blue for a 1/1. This guy also is Changeling. And has the activated ability 2 and a blue. Target shapeshifter becomes a copy of target creature until your next turn. So this is a good way to get value out of our opponent's creatures. And this can also be activated at instant speed in response to anything your opponents are doing. Arvinox, the Mind Flail. This thing's like 62 cents. 4 black, black, black for a legendary enchantment creature horror. Arvinox the Mind Flail isn't a creature unless you control 3 or more permanents you don't own. At the beginning of your end step, exile the bottom card of each opponent's library face down. For as long as those cards remain exiled, you may look at them, you may cast permanent spells from among them, and you may spend mana, as though it were mana of any color, to cast those spells. This guy's a 9/9. This thing is pretty dope because you're going to be stealing your opponent's creatures out of the graveyard, and then if you have your commander out, he'll have Menace, and he's going to be a giant 9/9. So, decent card in this deck. Ooh, spooky. We have Concealing Curtains for 1 black mana. It has Defender. It's a creature wall, 0/4, and you can transform it for 2 and a black, activate only as a sorcery, and it turns into Revealing Eye. It's a creature Eye Horror, has Menace. When this creature transforms into Revealing Eye, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do that, player discards that card, then draws a card. So kind of the cool thing about that is that if your opponent has a big fat card in their hand, you can have them discard it and then hit it with Reanimate or one of our other reanimation spells. Oh man, never sleep on Consuming Aberration. It's 3 blue and a black for a creature horror, Star. Consuming Aberration's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. So if you're milling out 3 opponents, this thing's going to get huge. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card. Put those cards into his or her graveyard. This card is a bomb, dude. About the Docent is decent. 3 blue for a creature. It's an insect horror. It's a 5/4 with flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. Then if you control 3 or more wizards, transform Docent of Perfection. And he transforms into Final Iteration. It's a creature Eldrazi insect. It's a 6/5. Has flying. Wizards you control get +2/+1 and have flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 blue human wizard creature token onto the battlefield. So black and blue have some of the best removal in the game and some of the best control elements. So this is a payoff for Spellslinger heavy decks. Elder Brain. So this is 5 black for a creature horror. Has Menace already. It's a 6/6. Whenever Elder Brain attacks a player, exile all cards from that player's hand. Then they draw that many cards. You may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So this is kind of a huge card advantage engine. Geralf's Mind Crushers, 4 blue for a creature, zombie horror. Whenever Geralf's Mind Crusher enters the battlefield, target player puts the top 5 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, and it has Undying. So basically this is putting cards in our opponent's graveyard, and then our commander will trigger and we can get some of those awesome fatties back. Grazilax the Brain Snacks is 1 blue for a legendary creature horror. It's a 3/2. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So you gotta hit more than one player with a creature in order to draw more than one card per turn, but this thing's pretty awesome. About the Guilt Feeder. Look at this art, dude. This guy is just feeding off this guy's brain guilt. So this is 3 black for a creature horror. It's a 0/4 with fear. So whenever Guilt Feeder attacks and isn't blocked, defending player loses 1 life for each card in his or her graveyard. So in a mill deck, this is a win condition. If you mill a person out for 35 cards at some point, and this guy comes through unblocked, they're dead. And guess what? You don't even have to feel guilty about it. How about this guy, Hullbreaker Horror? 5 blue for a creature, Kraken Horror. It's a 7/8 with flash. Can't be countered. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This is another win condition in Spellslinger decks. So if you decide to build this guy with a more spell focus, this thing is a great payoff. How about the old classic Hunted Horror? It's black mana for a creature horror, 7/7. What's up with that? It's got to be some drawback, right? Well, it's got trample, and when Hunted Horror comes into play, put 2 3/3 green centaur creature tokens with protection from black into play under target opponent's control. So we can give our opponent some blockers. In exchange, we're going to have this big fat monster out there to swing at our other opponents. Ooh, Freshly Spoiled Illithid Harvester for 4 and a blue. It's a 4/4 horror, but it also has this adventure. So it has X blue, sorcery adventure, tap X target creatures. They don't untap during their controller's next untap steps. It also has Ceromorphosis. Whenever Illithid Harvester enters the battlefield, turn any number of target tapped non-token creatures face down. They're 2/2 horror creatures. This is awesome in this deck and can help us control the board. You ever hear a Mage Hunter? It's 3 and a black for a creature horror. It's 3/4. Whenever an opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery spell, they lose 1 life. So this will basically prevent our opponents from storming off while this thing's on the battlefield. Mind Flayer, my least favorite enemy from Bloodborne, is 3 blue for a 3/3. Creature horror, dominate monster. When Mind Flayer enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature for as long as you control Mind Flayer. This is a pretty awesome effect in a deck like this. Nemesis of Reason, or should I say my ex-girlfriend. 3 blue and a black for a creature, Leviathan Horror. It's a 3/7. Whenever Nemesis of Reason attacks, defending player puts the top 10 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So this thing is awesome because it's a horror, and it's awesome because it's helping mill our opponents. The Night Howler from Zootopia is 1 black for an enchantment creature horror. It's a 0/0, but it also has Bestow, 2 black. Night Howler and enchanted creature each get +X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So if you are effectively milling your opponents out, this thing can get quite big and add a big bonus onto one of our creatures. Overcharged Amalgam is 2 blue for a creature, zombie horror. It's a 3/3 with flash and flying and exploit. When Overcharged Amalgam exploits a creature, counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability. So this thing's a very versatile card that can counter basically anything our opponents are doing, and it can exploit itself as well. Sewer Nemesis. This guy's chilling with the mutant ninja turtles in the sewers. It's 3 and a black for a star. As Sewer Nemesis enters the battlefield, choose a player. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in the chosen player's graveyard. Whenever the chosen player casts a spell, that player puts the top card of their library into their graveyard. This guy's real cool in a mill deck. Sludge Monster is also another one of my ex-girlfriends. 3 blue for a creature horror. It's a 5/5. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, put a slime counter on up to 1 other target creature. Non-horror creatures with slime counters on them lose all abilities and have base power and toughness 2/2. So this guy will help us control the board and help us to mill our opponents when he slaps in with our menace granted by our commander. Oh, and Spellskite is a horror. I didn't even know that. This is an awesome little card. Check it out. Thing in the Ice is 1 and a blue for a creature horror. Has Defender. Thing in the Ice enters the battlefield with 4 ice counters on it. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, remove an ice counter from Thing in the Ice. Then if it has no ice counters on it, transform it. So this is kind of a Spellslinger payoff as well, but it transforms into Awoken Horror. It's a creature, Kraken Horror 7/8. When this creature transforms into Awoken Horror, return all non-horror creatures to their owner's hands. So this is like a big old board wipe for horror decks. Toxrill the Corrosive, 5 black for a legendary creature, Slug Horror. It's a 7/7. This is a big fat reanimation target. At the beginning of each end step, put a slime counter on each creature you don't control. So that's each end step, each creature you don't control. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 for each slime counter on them, and they will add up very quickly. Whenever a creature you don't control with a slime counter on it dies, create a 1/1 black slug creature token. Then it has blue and black, sacrifice a slug, draw a card. This thing is awesome and is now like $10. How about Umbrus, 3 blue and a black for a legendary creature, Nightmare Horror. This guy's Fear Manifest, bro. He gets +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile. Whenever Umbrus or another Nightmare or Horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a land card. This thing gets mega huge. I was recently killed by it, and it was like an 18/18. So for your mill decks, you want to put in cards like Mind Crank and Mesmeric Orb. These are going to be mill enablers and things that pay off mill when they happen. So I think if you can cobble together a bunch of horror cards, stuff that's really good, some of the stuff that I talked about, some control elements, counter spells, removal spells, and these mill enablers / payoffs, you're going to have an awesome deck on your hands, and I think this guy can be pretty powerful. Then you definitely want to put in some win conditions like Sir Conrad the Grim, 3 black for a 5/4 legendary creature, Human Knight. I'm not going to read all the text on this guy. I mean, this thing's a staple in mill decks and is just an awesome card in general. Whoa, this video got long. I could talk about horrors and reanimation spells and mill payoffs all day, but, you know, I gotta go, you gotta go. Let's go live our lives, you know? And I want you guys to enjoy it, get outside. This is going to be Nicky G from Better Commander signing off.